Hey guys, and welcome back to the second part of our lesson on green screen. Today we're going to dive straight into After Effects and work on a fairly simple composite from start to finish. If you want to follow along, go ahead and download the footage from the link in the description below. With that being said, let's get started. Alright, so we're going to start off here with a new After Effects project, and the first thing that we have to do is we need to import our assets and our video into the project here. So a couple ways to do that: you can go to File, Import, or you can just drag them in from your Finder window. I'm going to drag in the green screen video I have here, and I'm also going to drag in the two background assets I've included here too. So now that we have all of our assets in the project, we're going to make a new composition to start our green screen effect. And first things first, we'll drag in our green screen effect here. And like I said before, this is a short clip that I took from one of our latest CK Productions videos, Mega Man Logic in real life. And with this shot, Mega Man's coming into the level and he's realizing he can talk and everything, but I'm not too concerned about this last part here. We're just going to deal with the first part of the video. So to cut that last part off, we're going to use the shortcut Command-Shift-D. And that'll cut it in half, and so we can delete this part here. So from here, we're going to start off by adding our keying effect, and the keying effect that they have in After Effects that's most widely used is key light. So you're going to search key light in here. So if you notice on this clip here, we have a couple of shades of green on here on the screen, but it's nothing too drastic. It's pretty smooth. Really shouldn't be much of a problem when we go for keying. And so when we have a situation like this, when we have darker areas as opposed to lighter areas, I've had more success using the slightly darker areas to key out. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to this eyedropper tool here, and we're going to drag our eyedropper over to the color that we want to tell the program that we wanted to key out. So we're going to go over here, and from a quick glance of it, it pretty much looks like the whole entire background is gone. But looking closely, we can still see that there are some fraying elements here. And if we were to keep it this way, it would not look clear. It wouldn't be acceptable as a good green screen key. So in order to really see how much of the green screen is really left and how much more work we have to do, we're going to change our viewing mode here in Keylight from Final Result to something called Combined Matte. And you're going to see with Combined Matte, it's going to change everything to either black or white. And what's happening here is everything that is black is what is keyed out, and everything that is white is still what stays behind. And now you can see that there's still some whiteness left over in the corners and the sides here, and you're going to see there's still some black spots still left here on Mega Man as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the tools that we have in Keylight, and our goal here is to make everything on Mega Man's body completely white and everything in the background completely black, and so that we have the smoothest and clearest key we possibly can. So in order to do that, we're going to go into this drop down menu here, and we're going to use Clip Black and Clip White. And by doing this, it's going to reduce the amount of black on the white spots and the amount of white in the black spots. So go into Clip Black first, we're going to drag this up here, and you're going to instantly see that the white spots in our background where the green screen are going to disappear the higher we go up. And going to the Clip White, we're going to bring this down, and you're going to see those little splotches on Mega Man's body are going to go away here, and it's going to be completely white. So this is a pretty clean green screen, and we don't have much problem using the Clip Black and Clip White, but there'll be situations where it's going to be a little bit more difficult than this. And a good rule of thumb to show if you have a really good setup for green screen is the farther away the Clip Black amount and the Clip White amount are from each other, the better green screen key you have, because you'll see, like, usually farther down you have to bring the Clip White, or the higher up you have to bring the Clip Black, the sloppier and less clear your key is going to look. But we're at a pretty good spot right now to move on. So let's bring this back to our final result so we can see Mega Man clearly here. Now, a couple things we want to look at here. If we take away the black background and make it clear, we're going to look at the edges here, and you're going to notice the edges are still have a little bit of deposit of the screen here, and that's very common when you're using any type of keying element. And the good thing about Keylight is it has tools that we can use to get rid of that stuff. In other programs, you don't always have those tools, and you're going to be left with either the green outline or some jagged edges and such. And to refine our key a little bit, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the screen shrink or grow, and we're going to shrink it just a little tiny bit, and you're going to see that's going to get rid of our little green outline that we had here. and it's going to get rid of our little green outline here. And that's always a good thing to use even in any kind of situation where you're keying, just to put a little bit of shrinkage on there to get rid of any type of residue and any type of things left over from the keying. But you don't want to go too far because you don't want to crop out too much of your actor, so just a little bit will do. The second thing that we'll do is we're going to add a little bit of screen softness, and that'll take away some of the jagged edges that can sometimes happen when you're doing green screen. And it's also going to help it blend with our background a little bit more. But the most important thing to do here is you don't want to add too much screen softness, because if you do that, you're going to create kind of this glowy, unnatural looking thing. And you know, sometimes that might actually look kind of cool, but in this situation, it's not something we want. So we're going to bring that back down to the small amount, and we should be able to move on from there. Now the next step here is, so something not as obvious here that I noticed when I was doing this video was when using key light for a costume such as Mega Man, the key light can sometimes either take away some portions of the blue on his costume, or in some case create the illusion that the blue is a slightly different tint than it really is. And it's kind of hard to tell right on the surface, but when I change a couple parameters here, it's going to be a little bit more obvious. And this often happens when you're dealing with colors that are close to green on the color spectrum, such as blue and yellow and such. You're going to get those colors to be a little bit tinted and awkward because of its proximity to green, but luckily, again, in key light, there's ways to fix that, and that's mainly done here with screen balance. And when I pull the screen balance a little higher, you're going to see some of that blue come back in the back and the head there, some of the lighter shades of it. And when it comes to screen balance, you really want to find that perfect spot where you're going to have the most accurate color to what you had before. You don't want to go too far or too low, because other colors in your actors, such as their skin tone, might be taken away as well. So we're going to keep it right on this sweet spot here. There's one thing left we have to do with this key here, and it's a little obvious here. It's going to be his yellow buttons here. And like I said before, with dealing with colors that are close to green on the color spectrum, there's a chance we are going to lose a couple of different colors on the way. And especially because we did the color bounce here, using the color bounce to bring back the blues actually in turn took away some of our yellows. So we're going to do a couple things to bring those yellows back. So for example here, if I bring down the color balance all the way back to 0, you're going to see the yellows are going to come back, but obviously what's happened here is it took away too much of the blues, and this just isn't going to work. So we're going to have to find out a different way to bring back our yellows here. And it actually isn't that complicated of a process to do. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to create two different keys here. So I'm going to duplicate this video, and I'm going to change the key light that we have on the top video, and this is basically going to be the key light that's dedicated toward yellow. So I'm going to do the same shade of green before, but I'm going to pull this screen balance all the way down to 0. And if we check on here, laying them on top of each other, it looks pretty good. We're still going to have some of this dark blue in the top hue here, and it's not going to blend that well. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to get rid of everything but yellow on this top key here. And a way to do that is we can go to our combined mat, and we can focus on trying to get rid of everything but those yellow buttons by using the clip black and clip white here. So if we do that kind of more in a drastic way, we have it down to all the way down to the buttons and the skin tone, and that layered on top of the other clip should actually work. So laying skin tone on top of skin tone here isn't going to cause any problems. The last thing we want to do here is we want to check out the buttons here. We want to make sure that we don't have any gaps here left over from the other keys. So just like we did before, we did some shrinkage here. We're going to actually do the opposite. We're going to like grow it a little bit and kind of fill in these gaps here, and that should work out well for the buttons. Now, one thing that we can actually try to use to our advantage, since we have one color isolated with the key, we can actually try to do a bit of a cool effect with the buttons. What I did for a couple shots in the Mega Man videos, I made the buttons glow. Now, of course, we can't just put a glow effect on the top layer, because it's going to also affect the skin tones that were left over as well. So what we want to do is with the top layer, we want to isolate just the buttons by themselves, and we're going to do that by using masks. Now for a shot like this, it's not going to be too complicated or too time consuming to track it with masks, so we're going to do that real quick here. So let's make a mask surrounding our button here, and because we used green screen, it's going to make it a lot easier to make a mask to track around it, because we have a lot of alpha space to work with here. So all we have to do is really make a circle around it. So the way I like to trace masks in a situation like this is I actually like to turn the original layer on and turn the layer that I'm putting the masks on off. because with the original layer, I'm able to see everything without the mask, and I'm able to follow what I want to follow a little bit more easier. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to move the playhead up to our first clip here that has the buttons in it. So making sure that you're working on the hidden layer with your yellow key on it, we're going to move that mask over on top of the buttons here, and we're going to line it up just like so. We're going to hit the timer next to the mask path option here so we can keyframe it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move the playhead a little bit forward, and then we're going to move the mask over here. And what's going to happen is the mask is going to move from one point to the other, and it's going to cover all those frames in between here. And because we're using a green screen, we have a lot of room to work with here, so we can skip many frames and it's gonna still work here. So we're gonna do this easy track here throughout. We're just gonna keep moving it forward and moving it. And when his arm kind of goes off the screen here, we're just gonna simply hide the mask off the screen so it's not interfering with anything. And now we're gonna move forward to see when we see the buttons again. And it looks like we don't see the buttons until right about here. So an easy way to do this without getting in the way, we're going to put a blank keyframe right here, and in the next frame we're going to move up our mask and scale it right around here so it's covering those buttons. So it's going to move right to that spot instantly after that blank keyframe. And from here, making sure it's the right size, from here we're just going to keep moving it forward, resizing it. We have to, just making sure that we're just covering up those button size. We don't want to have it bleed over into any skin tones because we don't want glowing skin in this instance. I mean, that would look pretty cool, but probably not in this instance. So I'm going to quickly fast forward here to the end of my track. Go ahead and track your video as well, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so now that we're done tracking the masks in this video here, let's go ahead and check to see how they turned out. So it looks pretty good. That's exactly what we wanted, just to isolate the buttons here on this solo layer. So now with just the buttons isolated here, any type of effects that we put on this video layer are just going to affect this portion that we have isolated here. So in this instance, we're going to add a glow effect. So now when it comes to the glow effect, it really comes down to personal preference of how you want it here. Normally in this type of situation, I kind of like to bring the glow threshold down a bit to make more of a white, brighter type of glow, and then I like to pull up the radius too to make the glow expand a bit as well. But it's really up to you however you want to make it look, because the different parameters here can give you all different types of look when it comes to your glow here. Now another thing I can do for this glow here is I can go to this layer and I can change the blending mode to add. And doing that will just make it glow a little bit more intense here. And from there I can kind of change things a little bit more. And it's really, again, it comes down to how much glow you want to add and what quality you want it to be. And I think right here is looking pretty good. Now with both of these keyframe layers complete, I'm going to go and combine them into a pre-comp by themselves. So I'm going to select them both and right click and click pre-comp here and call that pre-comp Mega Man. So now we have both layers here in one alpha comp. And from here we can start adding in our background layers. So one more thing I'm going to add before I go into our background layers, I'm going to add a plugin that I have installed called Real Smart Motion Blur. It doesn't come with After Effects, but it's pretty easy to get your hands on. It's nothing, and it's not something that you need, but it's something I like to add that adds a bit of a subtle blur effect to your video. And I think this helps a lot when I'm working with green screen footage, because I notice a lot, especially when there's a lot of motion in a shot, you often can see some imperfections on the edges and in the motion of a green screen shot. And what this kind of does is it kind of helps hide those effects by kind of blurring them a bit. And like I said in the previous video, if you shot your video at a higher shutter speed to kind of avoid raw motion blur, this kind of is able to add a little bit of it back so it looks a little bit more natural. Alright, so with that done, I'm going to add in my two background layers. One is the floor here, which is the overworld, and the other is the high-tech background, which is going to add to be kind of our background environment layer. And first off, I'm going to make this background just a little bit bigger because I want the lines going by to look a little bit bigger. And so with all of our elements placed here, we have a pretty good looking green screen comp, but we want to do a couple other things with our background layers to make it blend together as a cohesive shot and kind of simulate how it would be shot in real life. And so one of the most important things to do when blending green screen footage with background layers is to simulate depth of field. And the way to do that is to add some blur onto your background objects. So In these situations, I like to use the camera lens blur. Like the name of the effect says, I think it kind of simulates the blur you'll get from a natural video camera the best. I'm going to add it to my floor here. I'm not going to put it up too high because this is kind of a medium wide shot. In a medium wide shot, you wouldn't have too much out of focus in the background. I'm going to add some more blur to the backdrop than we do to the floor to simulate a bit more depth. We're going to add the camera lens blur to the backdrop. We're going to bring that higher than we did for the floor here. So yeah, so it's not too much because again, this is kind of a medium wide shot. If we were doing more of a close-up, we'd probably put a little bit more. We'd probably put a little bit more blur in the background, but I think this works pretty well for what we're doing. And so the next step what we're going to do is to blend our actor more into the background. We want to adjust the colors a bit to our green screen comp to kind of fit more with the color scheme of the background. If we notice in the background, it's a bit more contrast, a bit more saturation. The blues punch a little bit more. We're going to kind of simulate those. We're going to simulate those kind of color effects onto our green screen layer. So for color correction in After Effects, I like to use LUMETRI color because that has all the different types of tools that you'll need all in one. So I'm going to throw this on here. I'm going to go to the curves adjustments here. I'm going to bring down the mid-tones just a bit, just to make the exposure just a little darker. Then go down to the blacks here, add a bit more, make the blacks punch a little bit more, and then I'm going to bring up the brights here to add a bit more contrast. Just really slightly here, nothing too overbearing, and then kind of push the saturation just a little bit more to make the colors pop a little bit. And we don't have to go too crazy with this because the way this was set up, it was set up with a kind of a neutral color temperature that wasn't leaning more toward a specific color. It's all kind of shot naturally. And then one more thing we can do here, in the curves here, we can drop the reds down just a little bit to add a little bit more cyan, and go to the blues and just bump those up just a little bit. We don't want to do too much because we're going to add some master color correction on top of all of this. Yeah, so that's looking pretty good here. Again, it's not too much that needs to be done, but it's just enough to make it blend just a little bit more. Now, just a quick side thing I want to throw on here is I liked adding a little bit of the mosaic effect on the background here. That makes it look a little bit more pixelated, a little more digital and kind of like gamey. And you kind of like pull these up a little lot so that there's more pixels and it's not too like blurry. And it's just a little touch that I added onto the background for these shots. But again, it's all, when it comes to this kind of stuff, it's all comes down to preference. So now with the background all set up, I'm going to put that into its own pre-comp as well. And the next step what we're going to do is we're going to do something called light wrapping. And light wrapping, like before I mentioned in the last video, is an effect used on green screen where the background is blended into the edges of your green screen footage. And if we're going to do that, our background has to be in a pre-comp layer, and also our green screen footage has to be in a pre-comp layer. So first we're going to duplicate our background here. We're going to put it on top for now. And we're going to add a series of 4 effects on here that are going to contribute to our overall light wrapping effect here. First, we're going to add a fast blur and bring that up just a little bit. Then we're going to add 2 set matte effects. So we can go ahead and just duplicate this here. And then in between those set matte effects, we're going to add a channel blur as well. And with these set mattes here, we're going to both set those to our Mega Man composition here. And what you're going to see now with the way it's set up right now, if we go ahead and solo this layer here, we're actually going to see the edges that we're looking for, but we're also going to see that layer filled in with the background as well. And that's not exactly what we want. What we really want is just to have those edges by themselves. So the way to make this happen is what we're going to do is we're going to go to that first set matte layer, and we're going to put that to invert, and that's going to do what we want it to do. That's going to make our light wrap here, our light wrap outline. And from here we can go ahead and work on these 2 blur layers to kind of get the look that we're looking for. We're not looking for something too sharp or something too blurry here. So something kind of in the middle. So with all the layers on, we can see it here. It doesn't look quite right. It kind of just looks a little more like he has blurry edges. And to fix that, all we have to do is turn this layer onto screen, and that's going to make everything in this layer brighter and kind of rest around his body just like light would. And from there, we can go mess with these blur effects just a little bit more just to get the look we're going for, but we're looking for something pretty subtle, nothing too crazy and nothing too much, because if we go too much, the background's going to blend into our green screen layer a bit too much. So if you look at the difference here, we can see just a slight difference. It helps separate our character a bit more from the background. It also helps it kind of blend in with the light that would be quote unquote being emitted from the background. When it comes to this kind of stuff, it's really all about the subtle things that you can do to make your shot just a little bit better. Now with all this put together, we're going to do a master kind of color grading layer on top of here. So we're going to make an adjustment layer on top, and then we're going to put a master adjustment layer on top, and I'm just going to do a couple adjustments here to kind of adjustments to the contrast and the exposure. And it's good to put a master color correction layer on top of this, and again, it's really up to preference on how you want your shot to look, so I'm not going to go over really specifics here. It's always good to put a master color correction on top because it's going to be good to see that both the color in the foreground and the background are equally affected and equally have the same type of tint or color or saturation as well, because that's how it would look like if it was shot practically. So we want to make it look as quote unquote realistic as possible, even if this is like a sci-fi kind of fantasy world. We want to sell the idea that this is not a composed shot, that this is all one unifying shot together. The less it looks like it was green screen, the better. And in a later video, I'm going to speak a little bit more about the subject of color correcting and color grading, and when's the best time to use certain styles and such. But for right now, I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead to the next part. Now from here, the shot is pretty much all set up and done and can be exported, but there's a couple other things that can be done in certain situations. It kind of helps sell the effect a little bit more. Stuff that doesn't need to be done, but stuff that can be done to help sell your effect just a little bit more. It always kind of helps sell the effect of green screen when there's use of good composition in it. By that, I mean having a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. And right now, we kind of do have a foreground, middle ground, and background, with our foreground being the subject, our middle ground kind of being the floor, and our background being the moving lines. But what we can do is we can add a little bit more liveliness to the middle ground and the foreground. And an easy way to do that in a situation like this is to kind of add some particle effects. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to import one of these particle effects I have here, and I'm going to put it over on a screen layer. And what this is going to do is just going to add some air particles into the air here and just add a little bit more texture into the shot and a little bit more like liveliness into the air into the atmosphere that's in this quote-unquote environment. And that's going to be good because it's always better to have more lively parts than just kind of still pictures when it comes to using green screen compositions. And you can really kind of go whatever direction you want to go. I'm gonna kind of add like a slightly orange tint to this, and just again another really subtle effect that you can add in here. It doesn't do a whole lot, it's not too overbearing. You know, it's just something that's just makes it just a little bit more pleasing to look at and kind of just ups the production value just a little tiny bit more. And there's kind of a lot of different ways that you can go about it, and a lot of different things that you can add to it. For this type of shot, there's not too much to be done, but in many different situations, there's all different types of things that you can add to your shot, you know, to help sell the effect and to really make some advanced composition here. One last thing what we can do here is and we don't have to do this for every type of green screen shot. We can also add some camera shake, and just some subtle camera shake can really kind of add to an effect sometimes, because when you see that kind of imperfection of the camera shake, it really kind of helps sell the realism of it if that's what you're kind of going for. And to make some subtle camera shake here, all we have to do, there are some plugins, but if you want to do it without plugins here, all you have to do is go to the wiggle position layer here and put that in here and pull down your parameters pretty low so it's not very high speed or not very high amount, and you're just going to see a little bit of a camera movement in the position here. And it's important also when you're doing camera shake effects to also add parameters to the rotation as well, because when you're holding a camera, you're not just moving the position, you're also moving the rotation slightly too. And that's also another thing that we're going to kind of move really low, even lower than they have here, like even lower the amount of one, like even just kind of 0.3 or 0.2 or something, just something really small and really subtle here. It's nothing too crazy, but it's something that just kind of like adds a little bit of a touch of realism to it. And for certain shots like this, it doesn't matter too much, but there definitely is going to be some shot that camera shake will be a very beneficial effect for you to use. So after all this, our shots look pretty good. We can really tell the difference when we look at this other example with a green screen shot just dropped in without any of the subtle effects that we used to add to our scene here. It really doesn't look right. It looks very digital, it looks very jagged, it doesn't look cohesive, but we can tell with what we have done here, it looks a lot more smoother and a lot more cleaner. And even though it's not quote unquote realistic, it's kind of fantasy and sci-fi, it's just, you know, the effect really sells a lot better, and it just looks a lot better in the end, rather than just kind of dropping and placing the effect in here. And that is the advantage of a program like After Effects, because there really is like a lot of options that you can go ahead and change and do some subtle effects, like I said before, to really get the overall picture that you want to get, other than a traditional editing program such as Premiere and Final Cut. While they do have green screen capabilities, it really is limiting, and if you want to really become serious with doing green screen composition, you're going to really want to dive into After Effects for all your green screening, because it really is going to have all the tools you're going to need to move forward and to advance your visual effects skills. So I hope you guys enjoyed this in-depth look into chroma keying in After Effects. As always, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to keep up with our weekly videos. If you have a topic you'd like me to talk about on this channel, go ahead and feel free to share down below. I look forward to seeing what kind of stuff you guys are interested in. I hope you all have a nice week, and I'll see you for the next video. Bye everyone.